Assalamualaikum, Miss.
Walaikum assalam. Good afternoon, girls. Okay, we have Lamar. Welcome. Thank you so much, Hiba.
Good morning, teacher. How are you doing?
Sweetie, alhamdulillah, I'm great. I was waiting for you.
Yeah. Oh, I'm really sorry. I phoned the teacher.
Okay, no problem at all. All right, we have 14 attendees. Okay, let them join. I shall take the attendance after some time. So let's quickly start our topic. Today we are going to cover active transport, inshallah. Before that, let me quickly check whether we left out or anything from this presentation, which we were doing in the last lesson about the movement in and out of the cells. I believe we did till here, if I'm not wrong. Yes? Who wants to tell me? Did we do this slide? We were discussing about what happens to the RBC over here, right?
Yes, Miss.
Yes, Miss. We're done.
Did we discuss about this already?
Yeah.
Okay. So the recapping of the contents we did already in the last lesson, wherein we recapped everything related to osmosis and diffusion, what all we covered so far. Let me do this two more slides which are left from this presentation, and then we shall start the new presentation on active transport, inshallah. So you can see the osmosis and animal cell over here, what can you see over here? You can see in this, on the left side, you can see the osmosis takes place, the water diffuses into the cell through the partially permeable cell membrane. Why is the water diffusing into the cell? Where is the water concentration high now, inside or outside the cell? Who's going to tell me? Why is the cell turgid or swollen? What's happening here? Didn't we study about the placid cell and turgid cell? Do you all remember, or you forgot already? Ladies? You remember? Who wants to talk about it? No one? That means I have to repeat again? Okay. So let me start from here. This is an example of a plant cell which we discussed about a turgid cell which has absorbed water from the water has diffused, or the osmosis has taken place from the surroundings into the cell. Why? Because the water is moving from the higher concentration, which is the surrounding concentration, to the lower concentration inside the cell, which has resulted in a turgid cell over here, which is quite swollen. Whereas you can see this is a placid cell, whereas the osmosis has taken from inside the cell to outside, resulting in the loss of water from the inside to outside, making this cell a flaccid cell, or a cell which is shrunken. This is what we studied in a plant cell. So this is how the plasmolysis takes place, right? So what is plasmolysis? Girls, how can you explain it? The shrinking of the cytoplasm away from the cell wall of the plant or the protoplasm in the bacteria due to the water loss. This is how it takes place from osmosis, thereby resulting in gaps between the cell wall and the cell membrane is known as plasmolysis, as you can see in this picture. Is the concept clear? You need to tell me yes or no, girls.
Yes.
Is it clear about the turgid and flaccid cells in the plant cells? So moving on to the osmosis in the animal cells, we discussed what's happening to the RBC over here. You can see this particular RBC, which is A, it is a normal RBC. Why? Because the water concentration is the same both inside and outside the cell. Okay, so it has the same water concentration. So the water is neither moving in or moving out. But in B, you can see the water concentration inside the cell is more compared to outside the cell. So what happens? This results in the movement of the water from inside to outside, causing the cell to shrink. This is what is happening here. right? And in C, you can see the water concentration outside the cell is more compared to the inside, causing in the movement of water from outside to inside the cell, making the cell more swollen and turgid, right? So if RBC are placed in a solution with low solute concentration than is found in the cells, water moves into the cells by osmosis, causing the cells to swell and eventually burst after this. So this is what happens even in animal cells, exactly like the plant cells. But the difference is that in plant cells, due to the presence of a tough cell wall, it prevents from bursting of the cell when the cell wall is absent in animal cells. So what happens if it is more swollen or when more water enters the cell, it eventually bursts because the cell membrane, it is very, very thin. So this is what is shown over here. This is the turgid swollen cell because of the osmosis from outside to inside, and this is the placid cell. You can see osmosis has taken place and water diffuses out of the cell through this partially permeable cell membrane. Is it clear, sweeties? Any questions? When I ask you, you say everything is clear, but when I ask you questions, nobody answers. May I know why? You need to answer, isn't it, when I ask you questions, because they are very simple questions related to the lesson. If you have any problem with the mic, you can also write it in the chat box. Okay, so please let the session be more interactive. When I ask you questions, please try to answer. Okay? Alright, so the last slide is plants. They rely on osmosis to obtain water through their roots, and usually the water in the soil is more dilute than in the root hair cells, so water enters the root hair cells by osmosis. This we studied already. So this is about the diffusion in osmosis, which we studied in the 3 active transport. So I want you all to open page number 35 from your textbook. We are doing active transport now. Okay, so before that, let me assign homework. We completed the homework, the question from page. Yes or no?
Yes, miss.
Yes, sweetie. So today I'm going to assign you homework from pages number 34 and 35. You want me to write it down on the slide here so it's clear? You want to copy down? Okay, she's not given the homework here. All right, so you may write down the homework. I'm writing it down here. Homework is page number 34 and 35 and question number 3.8 to 3.15. This is the work. Clear, ladies? Shall I post this on the group?
Yes, please, teacher. That'll be okay.
Okay, great. I posted on the group as well. So this will be your homework for today. So let's quickly start the topic active transport today. All right. Okay. So please open textbook page number 35. So let's start with a verse from Quran, which says, and whosoever obeys Allah and his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fears Allah and keeps his duty to him, such are the successful indeed. This is a verse from Surah Al-Nur, verse 52. This topic are to be able to explain the difference between the active and the passive transport. All right. So in the KWL, let me ask you the difference between the active and passive transport. What do you understand by active transport and passive transport, ladies? I told you what is passive transport already when we were discussing osmosis and diffusion. Yeah, go ahead, sweetie.
Active was the movement of molecules from low to high concentration.
Okay. Why is it called passive transport? It is called passive transport because no immediate energy is involved, right? The movement happens because of the concentration gradient, but no energy is involved in the processes of osmosis and diffusion to take place. That is why they are known as passive transport. Passive meaning no energy is involved. Okay, so before we move ahead, I want you all to watch a video about active transport. I sent you this video on the group already, but I don't think any of you watched it. So let me play it again. And I shall ask you what you understood about the video. Is the audio clear, ladies?
Yeah.
Okay.
In the first part of this video, we looked at diffusion for the movement of gases and osmosis for the movement of water. They were things that could easily move from a high concentration to a low concentration. That makes sense. So what is active transport for? Well, the clue is in the name, active. Work has to be done. Active transport moves molecules from a low concentration to a high concentration against the concentration gradient. This is the opposite of diffusion and osmosis, and because it is not the natural direction, energy is required to make it work. Active transport is carried out by protein carriers within the cell membrane, and they have a specific binding site for the exact molecules they are transporting. The substance binds to the protein carrier on the low concentration side, and using energy from respiration, the protein carrier releases the substance on the other side of the cell membrane, where it is already at a high concentration. See the difference between diffusion? No energy is needed because the molecules can just slide down the concentration gradient, whereas in active transport, they are joining the crowd, and so more effort is needed, hence the ATP. Active transport allows cells to absorb substances from very dilute solutions, such as root hair cells taking in mineral ions from the soil, and in kidneys, so we can hang on to the substances our body needs, such as glucose and sodium ions. Cells which carry out a lot of active transport often have lots of mitochondria to give them the energy they need. So from these two parts, you should know how cells take in substances and get rid of waste by diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. Just remember that for diffusion, the substance moves down the concentration gradient from a high concentration to a low concentration. Just think of the slide. You don't need any energy to go from high to low. It's easy. Whereas active transport is the opposite. The substance needs to move up the concentration gradient from low concentration to a high concentration. Think of climbing a ladder. You need energy to go from low down to high up.
Okay, that was a simple video explaining the difference between active and passive transport, which is the difference between osmosis and diffusion and the active transport. What did you understand from the video? Ladies, who's going on? Yeah, please. What did you understand from the video?
May I?
Go ahead, sweetie.
We learned that in active transport, they often have many mitochondria.
Where are the mitochondria present? The cells which help in the active transport, those type of cells, they have more mitochondria, right, in order to produce more energy. So which are the cells which need more mitochondria? We studied this when we were doing the cell organelles, right? Who's going to tell me? We gave examples of few cells which have more mitochondria depending upon their action. Which are those cells?
May I?
Go ahead.
Nervous cells from the brain. And muscle cells. And sperm cells.
Yes, excellent. So we studied when we were talking about mitochondria that muscle cell, the sperm cells, and the which are the other ones, the nerve cells which carry the nerve impulses. They do a lot of action, so that is why they have more mitochondria because they need more energy. Similarly, whichever cells which are involved in active transport, they have more mitochondria because of the expenditure of the energy. So basically, with what was explained in the video, thank you so much, sweeties, the ones who explained the video and also who gave the examples of the cells right now. Active transport, you can say it is an opposite of passive transport, which is opposite of diffusion or osmosis. Now we said diffusion, it is the movement from the high concentration to the low concentration down a concentration gradient, right? So similarly, active transport, it is an opposite to it, wherein there is movement of molecules from low concentration to high concentration across the concentration gradient. That means you're going against the concentration gradient, for which you need energy, isn't it? As given in as the example given in the video, when you're sliding down the ladder, you don't need much effort to put in, right? It just flows down because it is going down the concentration gradient. Similarly, if you're trying to take a boulder or a big boulder, you know, to the top of the hill, you need to put in effort. You need energy. And when it reaches the top of the hill, it just slides down. Does it need any energy to slide down or go down the concentration gradient?
No.
No. That is what happens in diffusion and osmosis. As the particles are moving down the concentration gradient, no energy is required. Whereas in active transport, as they are traveling in the opposite direction, as the name suggests active, the energy is involved in the active transport wherever it takes place in the body. Okay, girls, so that is, I'm so sorry for the interruption. So that is the difference between the active and the passive transport. So let's also discuss it further from the lesson. So you can see on the slide the passive transport review, which we discussed just right now. It includes the solute, that is substance being dissolved in the solution, a solvent, the substance in which a solute is dissolved, and the concentration is also involved, the amount of solute per unit of the solvent, and of course diffusion, movement of material across the cell membrane from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. So energy is not required. All right, and also the equilibrium is maintained, the concentration is the same throughout till an equilibrium is reached, the osmosis or the diffusion, it takes place, right? Okay, ladies. So what is active transport actually? The cells, they often have to move materials against the concentration gradient, against it. Okay, so the movement of material across the cell membrane against the concentration gradient is called active transport. So this is how you define it. So we are not going down the concentration gradient here, we are going against it. The movement of materials or molecules across the cell membrane, and again the cell membrane is involved over here, against the concentration gradient is called active transport. So let's also look the information given in your textbook on page number 35. There are many occasions when cells, they need to take in substances which are only present in small quantities around them. So root hair cells in plants, for example, they take in nitrate ions from the soil. Very often the concentration of nitrate ions inside the root hair cell is higher than the concentration in the soil. So the diffusion gradient for the nitrate ions is out of the root hair and into the soil. So one of the examples is the movement of the nitrate ions from the soil to inside the root hair cell, which takes place in the plants. So despite this, the root hair cells are still able to take nitrate ions in. They do it by a process called active transport. So active transport is an energy consuming process by which substances are transported against their concentration gradient, and the energy is provided by the respiration in the cell. All right. So one of the examples of active transport is how the nitrate ions, they move from the soil through the root hair cells inside the root. Okay, so this happens against the concentration gradient. And how is this happening? Because of the energy. Energy is involved. Wherever active transport needs to be done, energy is involved. And where does the plant get the energy for this? The ATP, which I hope we discuss about it, or we are going to discuss about it further. We know for now that ATP, it is the energy of the cell, energy currency of the cell. ATP is produced as a result of the photosynthesis in plants and cellular respiration in plants and animals. So this ATP, which is produced, the energy in the cell, it is used up for this active transport to take place. Okay, so for these nitrate ions to move from the soil to inside the root, energy is involved, which the plant gets as a result of the cellular respiration. So in the cell membrane on the root hair cells are special transport proteins. So for active transport to take place, special transport proteins are involved. These proteins, they pick up the nitrate ions from outside the cell and then change shape in such a way that they push the nitrate ions through the cell membrane and into the cytoplasm of the cell. Okay, you can see in this picture, which explains clearly on page number 35 about active transport. What do you see in this picture? You can see there is an transport protein which is involved, and you can see the glucose molecule which is being pushed inside the cell. Right, you can see clearly the outside of the cell and the inside of the cell, and you can see the yellow colored cell membrane there in the picture. Right, so in step 1, you can see the glucose molecule enters the transport proteins. So these two, the way which is being opened, that is shown in this picture in step 1, that is nothing but the transport proteins which facilitate the movement of the molecules or the ions. Okay, so they help in pushing the molecules or the ions in the opposite direction. Okay, that is what is happening here. In step 2, you can see the transport protein changes shape. The energy needed for it to do this is provided by the respiration in the cell. So you can see how the transport proteins, they are changing shape in order for this glucose molecule to enter the cell. In step 3, you can see the change of the shape of the transport protein pushes the glucose molecule into the cell. So these transport proteins are nothing but the facilitators which help in pushing these molecules from outside to inside the cell. You can imagine them like a gateway. Okay, or they are the ones which are facilitating the entry of these molecules across the concentration gradient or against the concentration gradient. Okay, so they change shape and they allow this glucose molecule to enter the cell. So this is the example discussed over here. Now let's also check from the slide which you have. You can see on this slide here. The active transport, it uses energy, which is ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It moves molecules from a region of low concentration to a region of high concentration. So you can see this is a region of low concentration and this is a region of high concentration. So this is how the active transport is being done from low to high, which is against the concentration gradient. So as it is going against the ATP, the energy is used up. Okay, so active transport is carried out by transport proteins which are embedded in the cell membrane. So as it happens across the cell membrane, the certain proteins which are present on the surface of the cell membrane, known as the transport proteins, they play a vital role in this active transport. They help in pushing these molecules inside the cell or against the concentration gradient. Okay, like the example we just now discussed from the textbook. So you can see this is how the active transport it takes place. The energy is involved. These are the transport proteins which are helping in this process to take place. Do you see? Now this is the transport protein over here which is making a gateway here, allowing the protein to enter. Girls, do you see this transport protein over here in pink? Are you following me?
Yes, miss.
Yes, teacher.
Or no? Okay, so this is the transport protein and this is the molecule which needs to be transported. So this transport protein, it now changes shape, allowing this molecule to enter inside the cell. So can you see how it's happening? Energy is involved and this transport protein closed from here and opened this way, now making way for this molecule to enter the cell. Have you seen how it has happened? Is it clear? Do you see how the molecule is being transported from left side to right?
Yeah.
Any questions? Is it clear to everyone about active transport, how it takes place, ladies? Any questions? Hello?
Yes, teacher, everything's clear about the active transport.
It's clear? Okay, thank you so much. So this is how the active transport takes place. Let me also read out the information we have in the textbook. Okay. So what is the example we gave just now for the active transport to take place? We gave the example of the root hair cells, how they transport the nitrate ions from the soil to the inside of the cell, right? So in the cell membrane of the root hair cells are special transport proteins. What do? They pick up the nitrate ions from outside the cell and then change shape in such a way that they push the nitrate ions through the cell membrane and into the cytoplasm of the cell. This is how they change shape and they help these ions to push inside the cytoplasm of the cell. So as its name suggests, active transport, it uses energy, and the energy is provided by respiration inside the root hair cells. Okay, so we know the respiration, how it takes place, the cellular respiration. For example, in the process of photosynthesis, the energy which is produced also as a result of the cellular respiration in the plants and animals both. This energy, it is used for this process to take place. Energy is needed to produce the shape change in the transport protein. You can think of active transport as a process in which chemical energy that has been released from glucose by respiration is converted into kinetic energy of molecules and ions. So which type of energy is required over here for this active transport to take place? It is the kinetic energy. And from there, does the plant get this kinetic energy? The ATP is converted into kinetic energy for this active transport to take place. Similarly, most other cells that can carry out active transport. In the human small intestine, for example, glucose, it can be actively transported from the lumen of the intestine into the cells of the villi. This is what is shown in this picture in your textbook as to how the glucose it is transported. Okay, so in kidney tubules, glucose is actively transported out of the tubule and into the blood. Okay, so in plants, you can give the example of active transport in the root hair cells in the absorption of the nitrate ions from the soil. And in the humans, you can give the example of how the glucose is absorbed. It is actively transported from the lumen of the small intestine into the cells of the villi. And another example is in the kidney, the tubules, in the kidney tubules, glucose is actively transported out of the tubule into the blood by the help of active transport. Clear, ladies? Any questions about active transport?
No, teacher, all clear.
All clear?
Yes, all clear. Yeah.
Great. So with this we are done with this topic. I hope the concept is clear. Again, I'm emphasizing on the concept, ladies. It needs to be clear in your mind. You need to get a clear picture, the difference between diffusion and osmosis. What are they? And what is active transport? And what are the examples of all three? All this. So is it clear so far? That is why I once again repeated with another presentation, so it's clear for you. If you have any questions, you can ask me. You need to memorize the key definition which you have on page number 35 for active transport. And we have again homework here. We have an activity.